The night felt ordinary, even tranquil as the stars twinkled high above. In a small suburban neighborhood, kids played in their yards, their laughter drifting into the air. Alex, a 10-year-old boy, raced down the street on his bike, his younger sister Claire trailing behind on a scooter. They didn't notice the strange shift in the atmosphere at first. It was only the faint hum of something overhead that caught Alex's attention. He stopped, looking up, his heart pounding as something massive blocked out the stars. A shadow, blacker than the night, stretched across the sky. Claire slowed down beside him, but she didn't see it at first. Alex tugged her sleeve, pointing upward, his voice barely a whisper. "What's that?" The massive shape was too distant for detail, but the sound, the hum, was unmistakable. Then the sky seemed to crackle, and the air itself seemed to warp. Claire gasped as a beam of light shot down from the ship like a laser's focus, and before Alex could even think to react, she was gone. No scream, no time to reach for her. The beam pulled her into the air and she disappeared into the ship's shadow. Panic surged in Alex. He dropped his bike, running toward where Claire had been taken. He could hear the distant hum growing louder now, as if it was all around him. His legs burned as he ran, but his feet felt heavy. He looked up to see a dozen more beams of light flickering down, lifting others from the ground in the same terrifying manner. He screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the ship's engines and the chaos unfolding around him. The lights in the sky flickered again, and everything seemed to slow. Alex's breath was tight in his chest, but his mind moved, faster than his body. He had to find Claire, he had to. But then his thoughts fractured. Was there a way to fight back? His eyes flickered to the dark sky where the ship hovered, now casting an eerie glow over the street below. He turned to look at his neighbors, all caught in the same confusion and terror. There was nothing they could do. No way to fight something this massive. He could barely even process what was happening. Was this real? Was it a dream? The kids were disappearing, pulled into the belly of the ship like prey caught in a trap. It wasn't until one of the neighbors, a middle-aged man, lifted his head toward the sky with his hands raised in disbelief that Alex realized it wasn't a dream. It was happening, and they were all helpless. Alex's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He thought of Claire, of their parents who would never know what had happened. They were too far away to hear their screams. Before Alex could decide on his next move, a cold, mechanical voice boomed from the ship above. It wasn't human, not even close. It was deep, resonant, and entirely alien. Human subjects acquired. Commence transport to secure facility. The words felt like a crushing weight sinking into his skin. Something in him snapped. It was as if the voice itself was the final sign that his world had ended. His body tensed, but there was no escape. The streets were empty now, save for the few adults still staring upward, unable to process what had happened. He stood frozen for a moment, the knowledge of what was to come settling around him like a shroud. The world felt distorted, unreal. Everything familiar had been stripped away in an instant, leaving only a sharp, terrified silence that hung over the block. And then the ground beneath him trembled. Something moved in the shadows of the ship, the sound of mechanisms clicking, activating. The light from the ship above intensified, and a new sound echoed out. Metal scraping against metal, distant, but close enough to be felt in Alex's chest. Alex's mind raced. How could they have just come and taken them? Was it something they wanted from Earth? He wanted to scream, to fight, to somehow stop whatever was happening, but his legs didn't move. He couldn't. He felt something inside him freeze. It wasn't, until one of the beams of light struck down again, this time catching the neighbor man in the light, that Alex's thoughts cleared. His body was moving before he could stop it. He dashed to the side of the street, hiding behind a dumpster, pulling his knees up to his chest as the beam flared. He couldn't see the neighbor anymore, not through the light, but the man's last. Words echoed in Alex's head. "Don't let them take you." The beam vanished. The air felt thick with a strange energy, the silence returning once more. Alex's breath was shallow, but his eyes darted around him, searching for answers that weren't coming. The ship's shadow passed overhead, blocking out the stars again, and the ground rumbled as the ship began to rise. There was nothing Alex could do to stop it. They were gone. Claire, the others, maybe even the man. All of them gone in an instant. The ship was moving, lifting higher, and just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. The neighborhood was empty, silent. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting a sickly glow on the empty pavement. Alex stood, unmoving, for a long time. His hands were cold, his heart a tight knot in his chest. His eyes remained locked on the stars, on the place where the ship had disappeared. He wanted to scream, to rage, to do anything, but nothing came. He swallowed hard. There was no one left to help, no one who could do anything about it. Alex turned, his feet moving on their own, pulling him in a direction he couldn't yet understand. He needed to find Claire, but there was nothing left but silence. Above, the stars blinked, cold and indifferent. And somewhere, deep in the darkness of space, an alien leader watched the events unfold with a growing unease. Something wasn't right. The humans, these children, had done something he hadn't expected. Fool, Vorak whispered under his breath, his voice sharp with disbelief. You've just made the worst mistake of your life. He didn't know yet how true his words would be. But Alex, unaware of Vorak's growing concern, only had one thought on his mind: find Claire, no matter what. And for the first time in his young life, he realized that the fight had only just begun. The galaxy had underestimated them all. Alex woke up to a strange, unnatural hum, an ever-present sound that seemed to vibrate through his bones. The dark, sterile walls of the alien facility pressed in on him, suffocating him with their cold, unyielding presence. The room was dimly lit, the walls slick with an alien material that glowed faintly in the low light. He could barely see beyond his own hands, which were trembling despite his attempts to steady them. He tried to remember how long he had been here, but the time seemed to bend, warp, and stretch in ways that didn't make sense. His mind was still, clouded by the shock of the abduction. He hadn't fully processed everything: Claire, the others, the blinding light that had taken them all. But now, all he could think about was escape. Somehow, the room was not designed for comfort. It was a cage, just like the others. But there was something different about it. The walls pulsed with a low, almost rhythmic beat, a strange pattern that felt like it was alive. It was the kind of thing that might have driven a person insane, if they let it. But Alex wasn't thinking about the walls. He wasn't thinking about his own fear. He was thinking about Claire, and he wasn't going to let them all be lost. He stood up slowly, his body aching from an uncomfortable sleep he couldn't remember. His hands reached instinctively for his pocket, where he had hidden a small, smooth piece of alien technology. The artifact hadn't made sense at first, but now, as he held it in his palm, he could feel the faint hum of its power pulsing beneath his fingertips. It had been Claire who had found it, or rather, who had dropped it when she was taken. Alex hadn't thought much of it at the time, too distracted by the chaos around him, but now it seemed like the only piece of the puzzle he could work with. The artifact was unlike anything he had ever seen. A small cube, metallic and smooth, with swirling patterns etched across its surface. When he touched it, there was a faint vibration, like a response to his touch. Alex couldn't explain it, but he knew that it was important. It was the key, somehow, to getting out of this place. He looked around the cell again, his eyes narrowing. The walls, though unyielding, were not as perfect as they seemed. There were seams, places where the material seemed to shift slightly under his gaze. He had noticed the pattern when he first woke up. There were gaps, cracks, places where he might be able to slip through if he tried hard enough. It was strange. Why would the aliens leave such obvious flaws? Was it intentional? Or was this all part of a bigger plan? Alex didn't have time to contemplate the aliens' motivations. He had to move. He didn't know how long they would be left alone. He didn't know how long Claire could hold up, or how long the other kids could stay hidden in the labyrinthine corridors of the alien facility. But he had to trust that they were still alive. He had to believe it. The artifact in his hand seemed to respond to his thoughts, its subtle hum growing louder, vibrating more strongly as he focused on it. He stood in the center of the cell, the only source of movement in the sterile room. His heart thudded in his chest, and the quiet buzz of the walls seemed to grow louder in response. With a deep breath, he pressed the cube to the nearest crack in the wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden jolt, the wall shuddered and gave way, the material sliding apart like it had never been there in the first place. Alex blinked in disbelief. He had expected something, maybe a spark, or a jolt of pain. But not this. The wall was gone. It had simply melted away, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. Adrenaline surged through his body, and for the first time since his abduction, he felt a sense of hope. He had no idea where the corridor led, but he knew it was better than staying in this prison. Without thinking, Alex stepped into the hallway, the silence pressing in on him once more. The corridor was darker than the cell, the only light coming from strange panels along the walls that emitted a soft, glowing light. He moved cautiously, keeping his footsteps light, listening for any sign of movement. He didn't know what kind of aliens they were dealing with, but he had to assume that every step he took was being watched. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The hallway stretched on ahead of him, curving slightly as it descended deeper into the facility. Alex hesitated, then decided to keep going. He had to find Claire. He had to find the others. He couldn't be the only one who had escaped. If there was a way out for him, there had to be a way out for them too. As he moved down the corridor, Alex's mind raced. He knew the aliens had to be watching, but he had no idea how they were tracking him. The walls seemed to absorb any sound, so it wasn't like he could rely on noise to guide him. The only thing he had was the artifact. After what felt like hours, Alex finally came to a door at the end of the corridor. It was unlike anything he had seen before, a solid metal slab with no visible handles or hinges. The surface was smooth and seamless, almost as if it were part of the wall itself. He approached it cautiously, pressing the artifact against the door. There was a faint clicking sound, followed by a low hum. The door shifted, a section of it pulling back with a mechanical whir. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he stepped into the room beyond. What he found there was not what he had expected. There were no guards, no soldiers, just rows of strange, glowing pods lined up along the walls. Each one contained a child, suspended in a glowing liquid, their bodies unnaturally still. Claire was in one of the pods. Alex felt a surge of relief mixed with dread. She was alive, but she wasn't free. The same was true for the others, each one floating in a liquid substance that looked almost like stasis. The room was silent, save for the hum of the machines that kept the children alive. But Alex couldn't stop himself from stepping closer to Claire's pod. His heart pounded as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the pod. The cold glass felt unnervingly lifeless, but there was a spark of warmth, of life inside it. He had to act. But how? The door behind him slammed, shut with a sudden force, locking him inside. Alex whipped around, his body tense. He could hear footsteps now echoing down the hallway. The aliens were coming. They knew he was here. He wasn't alone anymore. But the danger had only just begun. Alex's pulse quickened as the door behind him sealed shut with a final metallic thud. The sound reverberated through the sterile, cold room, the silence that followed like a weight pressing down on his chest. He didn't have much time. The alien footsteps were growing louder, their rhythmic mechanical cadence unmistakable. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to find a way out before the aliens arrived. But the pod in front of him, Claire, was all that mattered now. His fingers grazed the glass again, a touch as delicate as it was desperate. She was still alive, her chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. There was something haunting about the way she lay there, suspended in that eerie liquid, her body at complete rest, but her mind trapped somewhere beyond her reach. Alex's stomach twisted. as the reality of the situation hit him. The aliens had taken them. They had taken her. He could hear the faint hum of the machinery, the pulse of an alien system keeping everything in stasis. Yet it felt as though it was sucking the life out of the room. This wasn't just a cage. This wasn't just an imprisonment. It was a place that drained every ounce of hope, every ounce of resistance. Alex clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He couldn't let this be the end. He wouldn't let them take Claire or the others without a fight. He didn't care if they were surrounded by 1,000 alien forces, armed with technology centuries beyond anything Earth had. He was done being afraid. The moment he had stepped into this facility, fear had been replaced with a cold, determined rage. He stepped away from the pod, turning his attention back to the door. The footsteps were getting closer. There were more than one, maybe even a dozen. He needed a plan. Fast. His eyes darted around the room, scanning for anything that could help. The glowing panels on the walls seemed to hum with energy, almost as though they were alive. He reached for his pocket, his fingers closing around the alien artifact. It had helped him before, but this time, he needed more. The walls, the pods, everything was foreign. He needed to understand what was happening. The artifact pulsed in his hand, an answer that he could feel but not yet comprehend. A sharp, mechanical sound echoed from the hallway, followed by the hiss of something. Metal. On metal, gears turning. The aliens were at the door now, or close to it. Alex's mind raced, and then, like a bolt of lightning, the solution hit him. The artifact. The artifact had opened the wall before. What if it could do the same for the pod? He didn't waste a second. He sprinted to the nearest wall panel and pressed the cube to its surface, waiting for the telltale hum of activation. A brief pulse of light flashed across the walls, but it was more faint this time. The artifact was weakening. It was no longer as strong as it had been. But Alex wasn't ready to give up yet. He slid it across the surface, pressing it against different areas, his breath shallow, desperate. Finally, with a sharp crack, the pod's outer shell began to shift. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Alex's heart race with excitement. The glass started to crack along one of the seams, and the liquid inside began to bubble. Then, just as quickly as the pulse had begun, the hum stopped. The pod locked, back into place with a final mechanical whir. Alex's blood ran cold. No, he couldn't stop now. He wouldn't. He slammed his fist against the glass, shouting Claire's name. Nothing. The footsteps outside the door were now in sync with his racing heartbeat. He had no time. There was no time to fix this, no time to figure out what had gone wrong. He needed to get Claire out, or they'd both be dead before they could even get a chance to fight back. Suddenly, the door behind him slid open with a soft hiss. Alex spun around, his fists raised instinctively. But it wasn't a soldier. It was a humanoid figure, taller than he was, with a strange, elongated head and a smooth, pale blue skin that shimmered like water in the light. Its eyes were huge, almost too big for its face, and they glowed faintly in the dim room. It was an alien, no doubt about it, but not like the others. This one moved with an eerie grace, as though it were aware of the subtle weight of its own existence. Alex didn't speak, didn't even try to. The alien spoke first, its voice like a cool, collected whisper that seemed to echo in the room despite its soft tone. "Foolish child," it said, "you have no idea what you've done." Alex didn't flinch, didn't lower his fists. "You've taken my sister," he said, his voice barely more than a growl. "You've taken all of them. You'll regret it." The alien's eyes narrowed and it tilted its head slightly, studying him with something like curiosity, though its expression was unreadable. "You think you have a choice. You think you understand the situation. But you do not. You cannot comprehend what is coming." Alex's anger flared. He stepped forward, ignoring the alien's imposing presence. "You took them. You took Claire. And I'll make you pay." The alien's eyes flickered, the faintest trace of something passing through them, something like surprise. "You do not understand, child," it repeated, its tone colder now. You are nothing. You are insignificant. Tell me that when you're dead, Alex muttered, his body tense, ready for whatever the alien would do next. He had no illusions about how weak he was compared to this being. But he had something they didn't. Determination. He wasn't about to back down now. The alien took a step back, its gaze shifting to the artifact in Alex's hand. It should not be here, it said, its voice colder, almost agitated now. Where did you find it? Alex didn't answer. It was the same question he'd been asking himself. Where had the artifact come from? Why was it responding to him, and why did it seem to be the only thing standing between him and total failure? The alien's posture shifted again, and Alex could feel the tension thickening in the room. You should have been wiped out. All of you. This was never supposed to happen. Its voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. You should not be able to fight back. Alex didn't understand. He couldn't. But he felt it. The growing dread in the alien's voice, the hints of something shifting within its cold, impassive demeanor. This was no ordinary alien. There was something more at play here, and whatever it was about to break wide open. Before Alex could respond, the alien turned its head slightly, its eyes flicking toward the door. The sound of more footsteps, more movement was coming closer. The others were arriving. Alex had no choice. He had to act. There was no more time for words. He charged at the alien, his only thought on reaching Claire, on breaking her out of this nightmare. But just as he was about to make contact, the alien raised its hand, a strange energy crackling around its fingers. Alex stopped dead in his tracks as a force slammed into him, pushing him back several feet. His head spun with the impact and his legs buckled beneath him. The alien's voice was quieter now, almost regretful. You don't know what you've unleashed, human, but you will. And when you do, you'll wish you'd never touched that cube. Alex barely heard the last words. His vision blurred and his body hit the floor. But even as the darkness crept in, one thought kept swirling in his mind. This was just the beginning. Alex awoke with a jolt, his body aching, his mind swimming in a fog that made it hard to focus. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was, or why he felt like he'd been hit by a truck. His vision swam, the room around him spinning in, disorienting flashes of light. But then it all came rushing back. The alien, Claire, the artifact, the fight. His breath hitched as he pushed himself up, his hands trembling as they scraped against the cold, smooth floor. The alien's words echoed in his head, a whisper of dread that he couldn't shake. You don't know what you've unleashed. He tried, to clear his thoughts, to push the weight of that warning to the back of his mind. But it was there, like a shadow, looming over everything. He had to keep moving. There was no other choice. He couldn't allow himself to be trapped in this place, unable to help Claire or the others. His heart pounded as he struggled to his feet, the world still swaying around him. He had to find a way to get out. He had to figure out what the alien meant, what it had been trying to warn him about, and he had to get to Claire no matter what. The door at the far end of the room hissed open, and Alex froze. The air shifted, the soft hum of the room vibrating through his chest. He knew they were coming. More aliens, more soldiers ready to take him or worse, destroy him. His fingers tightened around the alien artifact in his pocket. It was the only thing that had given him any hope. It was his only weapon, his only chance. But now, even as he held it, he couldn't help but feel the growing weight of doubt in his gut. The alien had said something about the artifact, something that made Alex feel as if he had just stepped into a trap. The footsteps grew louder, the sound of something shifting, in the air, like a massive pressure building. Alex's mind raced. He had to act, and fast. But what could he do? He had no way of knowing what kind of weaponry they had, or how many soldiers were out there. He had to rely on his wits, on whatever power the artifact could give him. Without thinking, he pressed the cube against the floor. The familiar hum filled the room again, and for a moment Alex wondered if it would work, if it would give him the same surge of power it had before. But nothing happened. The cube just sat there in his hand, inert and useless. Panic surged through him, but he forced it down. He couldn't afford to lose his cool now. He had to think. He had to figure this out. He glanced back at Claire's pod. She was still there, suspended in the same eerie liquid, her body motionless. The other children remained locked in their own pods, each one trapped in stasis, their faces pale and lifeless, but there was still a spark of hope. They weren't gone. Not yet. Alex took a deep breath and turned toward the door. Whatever was coming, whatever danger lay beyond it, he would face it. He had no other choice. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and a group of aliens stepped into the room. There were 5 of them, each one wearing a sleek, dark uniform that shimmered with strange, shifting patterns. They were humanoid, but their bodies were unnaturally thin, with elongated arms and legs that seemed to move with an unsettling precision. Their eyes were massive, wide and black, devoid of any emotion. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the aliens' gazes locked on him. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and his body was still aching from the earlier impact. He wasn't sure if he could take all of them on, but he didn't care. He would fight for Claire, for the others. One of the aliens stepped forward, its voice a low, almost musical hum that sent a chill down Alex's spine. "You've made a grave mistake, human," it said, its tone eerily calm. "You cannot comprehend the forces you've tampered with." Alex gritted his teeth. "I understand enough to know that you're not going to get away with this." The alien's eyes flickered with something that could have been amusement or irritation. "You think you understand, but you do not. You cannot." Alex didn't flinch. "I know I'm not going down without a fight." The alien's gaze hardened, and for a brief moment Alex thought he saw a flicker of something else. Something like concern, or maybe fear. It passed too quickly to be sure, but it was enough to make him question everything he had assumed about these creatures. The alien raised one long, spindly arm, pointing at the artifact in Alex's hand. That thing is a key. Do you understand? A key to something far beyond your comprehension." Alex didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on the cube. He had no idea what the alien meant, but it didn't matter. Whatever this was, whatever danger they were warning about, he was in it now. There was no turning back. The alien took a step closer, its eyes narrowing. "You've triggered something," it said, its voice barely a whisper. "Something ancient. Something that will change everything." For the first time, Alex felt a stir of doubt, something cold and unnerving crawling up his spine. The alien's voice had shifted, no longer filled with the cold superiority it had worn before. Now there was something in its tone that Alex could only describe as fear. But before he could process the implications of the alien's words, the air around them shifted. A low hum filled the room again, and the ground beneath Alex's feet vibrated with an intensity that made his legs buckle. His vision blurred, the world spinning wildly as the walls began to pulse with an alien energy. The artifacts around them seemed to come alive, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The alien's eyes widened, its expression one of disbelief and dread. It stepped back, its voice shaking as it spoke. No, it's impossible. You cannot." Alex felt the pressure build around him, the force of whatever was happening growing stronger with each passing second. He could barely breathe, the air thick and suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, the glowing panels pulsating with a strange, otherworldly energy. The alien's voice cracked as it turned to its comrades. "We've all made a terrible mistake." Suddenly, the energy around them exploded in a flash of white light, and everything went silent. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he stood, frozen, surrounded by an eerie stillness. The aliens were gone. The pods were still. The machines were silent. And then, out of the silence, a voice whispered in the back of Alex's mind. "It's begun." For the first time since his capture, Alex felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. Whatever was happening, it had only just started. But he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just fighting to escape. He was fighting to survive a force far greater than anything he could imagine. And in that fight, he had only one ally, the artifact in his hand. It was a key, and it was the only thing that could save them all. The game had just changed.